Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So you've just listened to a presentation that I made to the Mississauga Rotary Club about this show and how pleased I am to have spent the last almost 2 years, over 600 shows doing the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, where every night I get to interview fascinating people and have some time like this where I get to comment on what's going on. And so I thought, given that Canada Day is coming up, it's a weird, strange Canada Day because it's the second Canada Day during COVID-19. And we've had all these things revealed to us in regards to unmarked graves at residential schools in the past couple of months that I thought maybe I'd take this opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think should be priorities that we think about on Canada Day this week. And I've got a couple of shows that are going to air this week relative to that. On Canada Day, I'm going to have a show with my mom, Flora Crombie, who obviously is a wonderful lady, I think. But in addition, she is an expert at art. And she graduated in art and archaeology a couple of decades ago. She's been a docent in the Art Gallery of Ontario at the National Gallery of Art. She was involved in the Art Gallery in Montreal. And she is the best person in the world to tour an art gallery with. And what we're going to do, we've done a couple of shows with her before about art appreciation, art for Easter, art for Mother's Day, art for Christmas, etc. We're going to do Indigenous art. And, I think that one of the things that too many of us neglect is the contribution of Indigenous culture to what Canada is and who Canada is. It was interesting. They did a review the other day of Canada Day celebrations over the years. And one of the things that 50 years ago, the Parliament of Canada did as part of Canada Day is had Indigenous people almost celebrate assimilation, which is strange. They had a residential school with a whole bunch of young ladies come up in Scottish tartans and dance a jig. And that's not right. Assimilation is not what we should be encouraging. What we should be encouraging people to do, Indigenous or otherwise, frankly, is keep their own culture and enjoy and celebrate their own culture. Hopefully at the same time, be contributing members of society and not assimilate, but get involved in the economic and social opportunities that Canada provides. But we shouldn't be certainly forcing them to assimilate. If they want to assimilate, that's up to them, but not forcing them to assimilate. So I thought, my mom thought, my family thought, it was actually interesting. We were having a birthday celebration for my sister, and we talked about my next show for my mom, and it came up, why not do a show about Indigenous art? Because one of the things that we had in my family growing up is some Indigenous art always on the walls. And some statues, some Inuit statues. And so my family appreciated Indigenous First Nations art always. And my mom has picked about 12 different pieces, some famous, some not so famous, from across Canada. And we're going to talk about that on Canada Day. On Friday, July 2nd, I'm going to have Hope Air. And it's some people that volunteer as pilots to fly people from remote communities, some Indigenous, some not Indigenous, to major hospitals and health centers in Southern Ontario or major centers across Canada, so they don't have to drive for 8 to 10 hours. And we talk about effectively how healthcare is there for all of us, but access is an issue for people in remote communities, particularly Indigenous communities. And so that's a great show. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to do a show on changes in media, because I think the media landscape has changed dramatically. And it was changing anyway before COVID-19, but it's going to change even more so post-COVID-19 because of the digitization that's occurred, the polarization in the electorate, the echo chambers that have been created through social media, et cetera. And so we're going to have an expert on media talking to us about that. So I think I've got a couple of interesting shows this week. But I also wanted to talk to you about a couple of issues that are important to me. This month is Pride Month. This past weekend has been Pride Weekend. It would have been the Pride Parade. There were smaller Pride parades. I posted on Facebook today a picture of me holding a sign in a Pride Parade a couple of years ago that I love my gay son. And as some of you may know, my son, one of my sons is gay. It's never been an issue for me. And he knows that. And, we grew up in a very accepting and understanding and supportive family in every way, shape, or form. And he should have known that. And I think he did know that. And so I was surprised when he said that he cried when he saw me holding up the sign in a pride parade. So there was something about acknowledging my love for him, no matter his sexual orientation, in a public manner that was important to him. And that surprised me. But actually, I think it says something, because it says not only do we have to support people privately, but we need to support them publicly. They want us to support them publicly. And so for some reason, me being part of the Pride Parade and holding up a sign that said I'm proud and love my gay son was important. And so I think that applies for LGBT people. I think it applies for our Indigenous brothers. I think it applies for racial injustice issues. I think it applies for a whole bunch of different issues that we have to be more public in our appreciation for, celebration of, acceptance of, support for people that feel they need it, and that we feel are deserving of it. So that's issue number one I wanted to talk about, pride. Number two is residential schools and unmarked graves. And I think that this is a terrible thing that's happened, but there could be some good that comes out of it. And I'd like to take you back a year, almost to the day, to all the protests that occurred after the killing in Minneapolis of George Floyd. And there was an uproar in the United States, but even in Canada and around the world, of people that were unbelievably opposed to what was going on in the United States with this one individual. And as we all know, the perpetrator, the policeman was found guilty and sentenced to, I think it was 22 years in jail plus. So justice in that regard was served. But there was this unbelievable uproar, and we had protests, and the protests, and I had interviews and shows on it a year ago, where it was not just African Americans or African Canadians that were protesting, it was everybody. And young people of all races that were coming out to protest police brutality and injustices and systematic racism, etc. And so George Floyd had a positive, which was that I think there was more attention to racial injustice than there had been in a long time. And why that occurred, I think, was because of the video that was so personal of the kneeling for that time period. But it was also because COVID-19 people were paying attention to news like we hadn't been before. And one of the things that's going to come out on this show that I'm going to do on media on Wednesday is that people's appetite for and consumption of news, even though it's fragmented, has gone up dramatically during the last 18 months. So what's my point? My point is that I think that this residential graves, the graves at the residential schools, has brought forward an issue that probably some of us were aware of, but not nearly aware of enough and not knowledgeable about enough. And so finding these graves and unearthing them and the magnitude, the number of graves of children is terrible. There's no question. It's a tragedy and should never have occurred. But the fact that it did occur, and now we're finding out about it, and we're in the stark reality of it in the newspaper and on the videos and the screens and the conversations, etc., I think is good, because hopefully some good about this will come. I listened to a talk show yesterday where they said, read the recommendations that came out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or the Murdered and Missing Girls. And I think people are more aware of those commissions than they were when the commissions occurred and the recommendations came out today, and more understanding of, accepting of, and willing to support some of those recommendations. And we really need to do something about how we have dealt with our Indigenous brothers. And it really is, I think, Canada's original sin. If slavery was America's original sin, how we dealt with our Indigenous First Nations, Inuit, Métis brothers and sisters is probably Canada's original sin. And we've got to do whatever it takes to solve that issue. And then I think we've got the issue today of how people are dealt with in Indigenous communities. And I heard the former Premier of Social Services in Saskatchewan, the former Deputy Minister of Social Services in Saskatchewan, talking about how our current system is not that much better. We don't take them away to a school, but we take them away. And we don't have the right education. We don't have the right healthcare. We don't have the right drinking water, etc. We have not done right by our Indigenous communities. And we should, and we need to, and it should become a must. Issue number 3, COVID-19, vaccine hesitancy. We need to get to herd immunity. And it's not something that you're doing just for yourself. It's something you're doing for your community. Because even if you're young, even if you're strong, even if you don't have any pre-existing conditions, if you get the virus and you pass it on to other people, you are part of a problem that we need to solve. And I interviewed Alex Vesna of Prepared Canada, who talked about it, and I didn't agree with his analogy completely, but he talked about it as being people walking around with guns. Would you allow people to walk around with guns and loaded guns? And we clearly wouldn't. And so therefore, he said, if you're allowing people to walk around with a virus not vaccinated, it's like walking around with a loaded gun. And so therefore, he was talking about vaccine passports and forced vaccinations for people if they wanted to attend events, concerts, hockey games, even churches, etc. And I hope we don't get to that. But the way to not get to that is to encourage people to get the 2-dose vaccine. And so vaccine hesitancy and overcoming that and getting people vaccinated so we get to herd immunity and reopen, I think, is a critical issue that we all should be thinking about. And I spoke again to this media person who said that people's interest in COVID has gone down because they think it's over. Well, it's not over. You take a look at what's happening in South Africa, in India, where they're getting 3rd and 4th waves that are worse than any wave before. And this Delta variant is now a Delta plus variant. We have got to solve this problem, which leads me to my last issue, which is we got to get back to opening up. We got to get back to a good, vibrant economy. We got to get small businesses, restaurants, hairdressers. Look at my long hair. I need a haircut. We all need haircuts. We all need to go out to restaurants. We all need to make sure that Main Street businesses and retail stores and malls and shopping centers and strip malls are open and are vibrant, and we need to support them. So we need to get herd immunity for ourselves and for our communities and for our small businesses and medium-sized businesses. The large businesses seem to have taken care of themselves, other than maybe travel and hospitality, which is a whole different issue. But I am most worried about the businesses in Port Credit or Streetsville or Clarkson or Blurris Village or Beaches or wherever you want to describe it, that have been shuttered for over 300 days. And just now opening up patios and struggling. I interviewed one guy who said he's going into debt $10,000 a week, and he just, he can't afford that. So we need to reopen, and we need to support them, and we need to make cities give them patio space, not for one summer, but for like 5 summers, if not longer, so that they can make back the money they've lost in this past year. And we all need to shop local, and we all need to eat local, and we all need to party local, and we all need to go out and support those local businesses, vaccinated and with masks, until herd immunity is here. Anyway, those are my issues. I have the privilege every Monday through Friday of bringing you the Brian Crombie Radio Hour at 6 o'clock on 960 AM, streamed online at saga960am.ca. All my websites, all my podcasts and videocasts are on my website, briancrombie.com, on YouTube under the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, etc. Please check me out, and thank you so much for the opportunity to come to you every Monday through Friday and interview all these fascinating people. I have a ball. Hopefully you listen sometimes. Good night.